All right, it's another podcast. Your host Paul is in first place, and I have with me Alec and Andrew, and we're going to be talking about some trades. We're going to be talking about the league. We're going to probably get Sam on later as well, and I'm sure we'll argue a lot. So, welcome, guys. How you doing?
Great, you had to fit that in there, huh? That you're in first.
Well, that was number one on the list of things to talk about, actually.
Oh,
So,
I see. I see.
so
How
you know.
convenient.
How convenient. So, I did update our matchups sheet here with the wins and losses. Really, really nicely done, Andrew, with your win. So, congratulations on that.
Oh, let's make a comment about this after Zach's. Oh, I was green throughout the rest of the way. Now he's black, or I'm black. So,
Well, I figured I'm just updating it with the wins and losses. And what you said you're green all the way? I can't.
well, no, Zach Adcock was green last week for like all of his
Oh,
matchups.
yeah. Well, good job knocking him down a peg. Brings me into first.
How the turntables.
I'm very happy. Um, I mean, I do have the fourth worst points for, like fourth best points for, so, I mean, obviously I'm right
Helps.
there, right next to Sam and Todd, but, I'll still take it. I'll still take it. Uh, Looks like Andrew's really solid here. I put an asterisk here for Alec because he is not in playoff position as of
I'm
now.
sus.
So, but there's got to be Alec. You feel like you have a decent chance at the playoffs? I still feel like you have a pretty decent chance at the playoffs.
I mean, if you want to talk about all the avenues in there, I just knocked off 70 points in point spread between Austin and I.
Yeah,
So that
huge.
that still is absolutely an avenue in with 4 weeks left here. But not only that, Todd is also tied in games with me right now. I match up with Todd in week 12. It's not crazy to say that I might not even be in the sixth place position by the time we get to 14, just because it's so the win column is a little close right now.
Yeah, I mean, and Todd loses against Austin, then you beat Todd, and it's looking a lot better for you. And Todd has to play Andrew week 14, even though he has the green matchup against Jack. Um, you also have to play against Andrew. Andrew being the scary team right now. I mean, you're scoring a shit ton of points, so ooh,
Uh,
I don't know.
Blind squirrel finds an acorn.
Well,
Not me trying to be humble to not jinx this kind of streak. But
I mean, it's a really good run. It's kind of what you want going into the playoffs, but so you can be humble all you want, but definitely not loving having to go
what,
against
it's
you
not
next week.
sustainable? No. No, I get it. I get it. Like, we'll get into this later, though. I
Should we
won't
talk
tie it up
about
with.
Todd falling apart in the second half 2 years in a row now? Or, I
I
Is that
mean,
mean,
what's happening? I mean, is he just
if
getting unlucky or
right,
is he falling apart?
he's not scoring a ton of points.
uh, a point differential from like the first 6, 7 weeks to the last three, a huge drop off.
Yeah, I mean, everything's under 300 last few weeks. 7, 293, week 8, 286, respectable.
I mean,
But
these
Okay,
scores are not bad
272.
scores
No, no,
though.
no. But
no,
then
then
272
it
and
was
then
definitely
241.
Yeah, those
recency
are bad.
bias.
Like none of these are
Recency bias.
amazing. He's been hit by the injury bug really badly, obviously. So I kind of I joke, but like last year he was more unsustainable than this year. This year he just got much more unlucky, I think, with injuries. So there was that.
Yeah.
But
And let's be honest, he's getting Nico back in the next week or two.
yeah,
Yeah, that'll be good for him for sure.
yeah, just like getting McCaffrey back for Alec is huge. So
Yep.
yeah, Austin probably needs to be a little worried. Alec can be
Oh,
pretty
and Austin,
hopeful.
I didn't mention this. Austin and Todd are matching up this week, so there's at least one good outcome happening next week. 100%.
Yeah, and then Adcock has Jack. So everybody else has a tough matchup basically. That'll be a fun week. All right, what else is going on? So, oh, should we talk about the trade? The one trade. So we have the
Yeah,
trade of Brian Thomas Jr. for Austin and Alex first round pick next year. That's what it
yeah,
was.
25.
And oh, and then there's a third back in 26. Oh, and then there's a 2025 second. Whose second was that?
That
Oh gosh.
I think it's Adcock second.
Okay, so that's Adcock's second.
It was Sam's.
Okay, just
Sam's.
was wrong.
It was a Sam swap for his third to the second,
Okay, so
or 26th third, excuse me. Sorry.
So 26th third for Sam, 25th second for Sam. Okay. What do you guys think?
well, I'll just say that I like it. I know, Paul, you've talked a little bit with me about that you dislike it. Um, any thoughts, Andrew, on which side you are there? I can give some reasoning for why I like it.
Well, as the guy who was uh when Kyle gave me a heads up at 12:50 that this was about to go down, I'm not gonna lie, even being up 50, I was about to piss myself because I was like, oh great, like he's got a guy that's super volatile, let's be honest, but just that kind of player with his upside scares you. And obviously not having T-Law kind of limits it, but he's shown enough so far that it's just one of those things where it's like, oh my god, this guy can actually break into that tier one, tier two kind of wide receiver. But it was also kind of one of those where I don't like it in the same sense for Kyle. Like I liked it for Kyle in terms of value, but I also it's just one of those reinforcing the is this the Reddit forever rebuild sort of mindset. So
Yeah, and I think Paul is gonna agree with a lot of what you're saying right there. And I I agree with some of those statements that you've made, but to me it all comes down to if you believe that Brian Thomas is that anchoring wide receiver on your team in 1 to 3 years. Like is he going to be a tier one guy in the near future here? And to me, I don't think he is that tier one. I mean, you can't say anybody doesn't have that potential. It's all a range of outcomes, but in my head, he is a very good receiver that can be like your, let's say, second wide receiver on your team or something like that. Like he's not someone that you're probably building around, but he's a solid piece. So if he's just a solid piece, I think it's a good trade to get the value that Kyle got, if that is your take. And I talked to Kyle before he made that trade the night before, and I can tell you that that's exactly what he thinks. And maybe I swayed him a little bit, but I don't
no,
I don't
okay,
think he's the
so
building block that
so
everyone
I
like
guess
you guys are arguing.
when you said that point, I kind of thought you were talking about it from Adcock's standpoint of you liking it, not Kyle's standpoint. So
No, I
that
I like it for Kyle.
I okay. I do like I do agree that like turning the 110 into two future this upcoming draft rerolls is always just a good turnaround. And then flip obviously it's a Kyle special of I can speak firsthand with the JSN trade of turning a third into a second. Like
Yeah,
it's just good value turnaround. But at the same point, it's just kind of one of those where it's like, okay, you're taking a 110, which so far is showing as for the value for the pick as a hit, and then kind of re-rolling it again. It's still kind of one of those where it's like there's still a good amount of risk back on his standpoint.
Yeah, so I'm just a little bearish on his ability to re-roll this successfully. It's not as easy as we're making it sound to draft a guy
sure.
that's doing what Brian Thomas is doing in his rookie year so far. Um, you call this like, I mean, this is obviously a great hit already, and it's just really risky, I think, moving away from all of these producing guys. Like, how many producing guys does Kyle even have on his team? Not many. Like, he needs points, and he can't just keep rebuilding forever, and he can't just be relying on rookies next year. So he either needs to draft guys that produce year one, or in my mind at least, draft guys who produce year one, or trade this for some established guys in the future. Like, he's done a good job getting good value here, but who's he trading with? We're not sure if there's going to be guys that he's going to be able to buy from effectively. We're not like, I think a lot of the contenders this year are going to be contending next year. And guys like Zach Ford, I think, aren't going to be just tearing it all down. Like, clearly he's not. Like, he hasn't really made that many trades. He's more looking to retool into next year rather than tear it all down and go into like a Kyle rebuild.
Hmm.
Um, so I think it's difficult to see Kyle's path forward. Like, is he going to tank another year? Is he going to just, roll the dice next year? And it's not like it's a incredible wide receiver class either. So, um, I don't like it from like the value is fine. I just don't like it from where he's at the rebuild standpoint. Like, I just don't think you should be doing more than like a 2-year rebuild. And obviously, he's in his second year of the rebuild now. Uh, Extending it one more year just seems bad because I just think of it when looking at Sam and Adcock as my two clear examples of guys who turned around quickly a really good rebuild. So I just feel like those are the guys that you're trying to be like, and you can't just be extending and extending it as like as as Andrew was saying, like into that Reddit rebuild.
But I think there's
Is
kind of two different arguments that are being had here. It's basically a critique of Kyle's overarching rebuild strategy, and then subsequently the individual trade, the isolated trade, Brian Thomas for the picks. I think if you just isolate the trade, I really like the trade. Now, if you want to talk about his overall rebuilding strategy and should he do it from an overall rebuilding strategy, then you can get me to come closer to your side in the arguments that you and Andrew are having. But I'm more interested in the isolated trade, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I just don't view it as isolated, and that's where I'm coming from. Like, I think you're totally right in that. Like, I think it's, but like I also don't think it's like you're getting like you're not getting like a rip-off trade. Like, we were debating whether to include this into our trade discussion later, and we decided, it's not like it's not like an obvious like, oh wow, this is a dumb trade. Like, this is totally makes sense on both sides. It seems reasonable. You could take one side or the other. Um, but it's just in the context of Kyle's rebuild, I'm not sure if I love it. And this might be something that sounds really dumb in a year. I think it's very possible that it does.
I mean, at what point is it absurd? When would you ever give 3 first round picks for Brian Thomas Jr.? Like, that actually sounds absurd. And we're like a second and a third away from it being that level.
It's a good point.
Unless you don't agree with that
I
statement.
mean,
I
it's
personally think 3 first would be absurd.
yeah, I think that would be absurd. I think you're right, and it's a good point you're making here. Um, because he's not like in your top 5 wide receiver category, like of guys like that would be worth, 3 first plus.
Yeah.
So, which also brings up a good point, like how much one of those guys is actually worth, but we can get to it.
Any other points, Andrew? I've been talking a lot here.
no, no, no. I mean, just on the other side, like I remember last year I was coming off a rebuild, and then I made the Pacheco trade. I got shat on for making
Yeah.
like at the time an overpay, and it worked out. So it's also one of those where it's like, I don't know, when you see good value, you got to take it. So I completely understand that aspect of it, and I do not blame Kyle whatsoever for taking it. It's kind of like, if maybe Kyle just simply doesn't believe in BTJ long term. Maybe it's just a flash in the pan sort of thing, and it's cash out now.
Well, we're going to see if this lands onto our next year rip-off trades podcast.
But if it does,
Good
it'll
luck,
be in
folks.
hindsight.
Yeah, I know, I
Yeah.
know, I know. I don't think it's in that category. I just don't love it. I I just want Kyle to be trying to contend next year, in my mind at least.
Yeah.
Like just for it to make sense to me, because it's been the deepest rebuild we've seen, and so it's a little bit different than some of the other rebuilds we've seen. Um, Andrew being another example of a rebuild that was much shallower, and he came back into the playoff picture much quicker. I mean, Andrew, you were out of the playoffs just 1 year, right? Were you in the playoffs last year?
Yeah, but I didn't do the full tear down. I did the trade away guys over 28 sort of mindset.
Yeah.
Then
I mean, I think that's like a very reasonable method as well. Like, I think that's closer to what, like, I think you did the shallowest rebuild, Kyle did the deepest, and then Adcock and Sam did something in the middle. Maybe something in the middle is ideal.
well, this is a different point though. Can you call it a rebuild when they started off poorly as both of them did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say poorly, but like Sam year one and year two. That's the one I was going off, not Adcock.
No, no, it's that's another interesting point. Should Sam have sold year one, year two? Uh, I
Yeah, Sam
think
probably could have been good
fine.
sooner.
Yeah, he could have probably been good sooner, but did it make his team more of a super team year three? I don't know if it was. I feel like it
He
was
got
would
a
have been
ring. So.
worth being. He got the championship. It worked out really well for him. I generally think it's worth it to if you can do it cheaply to get to the playoffs, though. And I think he could have
Yeah.
been a playoff got team. Yeah, I think definitely he could have been a playoff team year one, year two. So year one, he started off like what 0-3 or something, and that's what kind of spooked him. So all right, let's talk trades. How about
Bad trades or just trades?
trades? So we were talking. Sam and I were talking the other day about some bad trades that rip off trades, that I've made, that Alex made, and after that discussion, I was kind of thinking this would be a good discussion for the podcast where we look back at some of the worst trades of all time. Um, so I've compiled a few with some input from Alec and Austin and Andrew, and I figured we could talk about them and talk about like maybe which ones were the worst, or maybe tier rank them, or maybe just rank them. I think like putting them into like the tiers, like what are the worst? What's the worst tier of trades could be good. So uh, I don't know. It really we have here a trade that started it all. I think the first true what the fuck trade was the McCaffrey trade. So,
Yeah. Um, and I will say for everyone that's listening, you see a few of my trades here. I was never the one to offer the trade up.
um,
True story.
you didn't offer, you weren't trying to get the McCaffrey. Like I thought you offered the McCaffrey trade.
I did. I offered it initially was flop Mixon in there for Darnold. Mixon was valued at around a first and a second at the time because he's a little younger and also producing very well. So to me, Mixon, a late first and a late second, sounds more reasonable. And then Cohansey decides to go and he says, "Nah, I want the Darnold,"
Oof.
because Darnold had a really hot start to that year.
Yeah, even though nobody believed in that start at all. Oh,
Yeah.
I forgot
So
that was supposed to be mix. Like you offered mix. You really,
I offer Mixon. It was in his inbox. He could have hit accept. I wake up in the morning with a counter for Sam Darnold in there instead. I think I hit accept within like 10 seconds.
wow. Well, you're hearing why Kohansky's on this list a lot. So I think for me, Andrew, I think we'll just do them in tiers maybe. Like, let's put this into whatever tiers we think are the worst trades. Maybe I'll put it here. Um,
Oh,
for me, I think the McCaffrey trade is very much in that like top tier of worst
Yeah,
trades, and it was definitely the trade that kind of started it all. I remember once Kohansky made that trade, I realized that I could try to get
it,
some guys off of him.
it's the we didn't start the fire trade.
So,
eh, let's put it this way: the floor of this is tier two,
Yeah,
absolute
I see what you're
floor.
saying.
yeah, yeah, it's just like like late first, late second, and Darnold, who was not worth like anything at the time. That is, you probably are. I mean, you are a Joe Mixon off, right? You're even a Joe Mixon today off at least.
Yeah,
You're because I think, especially at the time, McCaffrey, like what McCaffrey was 25. Um,
he just went down with the bad injury, so that's
no, no, no.
my.
This was pre-injury, wasn't it?
It was
This,
not. It was right. I bought him injured. Um, he was
ah,
out for probably 6 weeks or something before. Actually, I'm not even sure he played for me at all that season. Um,
yeah. So
but
what was this, 21? So he had the good start, and then he got injured.
I either bought on week 3 or week 4 there.
Yeah, and then he got re-injured after that. So you really started having him be a beast after that, and the
Yeah.
trade.
So the opportunistic thing there is, I was like, oh, he gets injured. Maybe Sam's willing to trade him away for a discount. Maybe he wants to get a running back that's actually playing right now, and I can get myself an elite asset that I think will remain elite once he comes back from injury. But then he goes and turns it into Darnold, and the rest is history. Yeah, it's tier one. I can't disagree with that.
Okay, I'm gonna put it tier one. I'll put it if there's disagreements, I'll mark them. I think it's fair to say tier one. Andrew, do you disagree? You think?
I don't have any issues with that.
Yeah. All right.
That was kind of the hint I was given there.
Okay,
So
so there's the second one, which looks much. It's a weird one in retrospect, but we should note that Jared Goff was not viewed as anywhere close to a top tier asset
He was worth
at the
like a
time.
fifth round pick at the time.
Probably, yeah.
He like
I mean,
a thousand on keep trade cut.
fifth would be
was this
stupid.
before JK got hurt? I can't remember.
This was
It was
after.
before.
No, this was after Dobbins got hurt, right?
He's been hurt 2 times. It was before the second time he
Before
got hurt.
it was in between. Okay.
No, there's no
Dobbins
way because he was hurt all
He missed year
2021.
one.
So this was
I remember.
October, so he was
Oh,
October
okay. Okay.
14th. So this was in the middle of the year. So this was like waiting
So
until
this
the
was
next year
I'm gonna buy low, but he still has a lot of value.
This is,
because it's
yeah, I guess
after
going into that
2020.
season,
Yeah, so this was mid 2021. So it was Zach expecting him back the year after.
Dobbins' value at this point is around a mid first. I remember the discussions and talking
Really?
with other people. Yeah, like Kyle was willing to give a first. Other
That's
people
crazy.
wanted to potentially buy him for a first.
Okay.
So
Still,
either way, bad trade
yeah, so this
because
still ended up being like what? So late second, late third, Gasecki. I think Gasecki was like one of his main targets as well. Like he really liked Gasecki, right?
the issue, yeah, he did really like Gesicki. The value difference here is that Zach liked Gesicki just as much as he liked George Kittle at the time, which essentially, when this trade actually happened in 2021, it became, in my mind, a free George Kittle on my team.
Yeah, I remember it being like to me, like a full first off in value, and it was just like you got the 2023 first for free. However, I also remember we have this put in as the 108 because Zach was better than we expected. I remember we all thought that Zach would be bad, and his
Yeah,
team
yeah,
was going
exactly.
downhill. So we thought it was going to be like a top four, top five pick. At least I did. So
Yeah,
I viewed this trade much differently, where I thought it was a much bigger gap. However, subsequently, Jared Goff became Jared Goff that we know today, and this became a very good trade for you. But that's with hindsight. Like, and I guess we should talk about it, but like, we're trying to view these trades as they were, like how much of a ripoff they were at the time, not necessarily like not like looking at how everybody ended up afterwards or how the draft picks ended up or whatever, because it's kind of an unfair way to evaluate the trade.
I think if you rip someone off for a first round in value, it's a pretty bad trade, even with hindsight. And Kittle was worth a first rounder, so it's absolutely a first round difference, like you were saying.
Yeah, like pretty much ignoring Goff because nobody really cared about Goff in this trade at
Goff
all,
wasn't
which
even
is
part of the trade,
hilarious.
really.
Yeah, like nobody was like, oh wow, he really no, it didn't matter at all. Um, I want to put it tier one, but like honestly, it's probably not as bad as some of the trades that are coming. So maybe I put it tier
I
two.
think this is I think this is closer to three than one.
Really, I definitely put this more tier
Well,
two at least.
now I may be influenced by the picks after, but just looking a row down,
Yeah.
like that's
Let's put in a
it's no offense to
tentative
you.
tier two. Well, okay, I'm gonna say tier
Yeah,
two for me. Maybe
I
tier
I think the average would be two, is what I'm getting at. So
maybe three. Okay. Yeah, so the reason I just felt like it was really, really far off in value, and I think that's true. I think like that first off in value to me gets to that like McCaffrey tier, although maybe McCaffrey was even more off than that. And like not to say that my future trades here, which we have not gotten to yet, are not also insanely off in value. So yeah, let's move on. So give that one a two. Tier two. We'll see. All right, you finally get to me. So this is pretty funny to see because October 13th, October 14th, right after another, Alec made two trades that I viewed as crazy. I think everybody viewed as like big
Wow, I
advantages
was
to
really going ham.
Alec. So I'm like, I need to make something happen, right? And so I remember post McCaffrey, post this trade, this Kittle trade, trying really hard to get something similar going for myself. So we have Jamar Chase, the infamous trade, possibly the worst trade of all the league. And we should also see which one's the worst trade of the league. What do you guys think?
I mean,
so
I've
let's
been
just think
arguing.
about
Go,
this.
go ahead, Andrew.
I was gonna say, let's think about this. This is October 2021. Now, is this Chase's first or second year at the time?
First year.
First year.
Let's look at
Okay.
what game did he have just before this trade?
I think it was um I think it was the Detroit, like it was week after week 6, I think, because I think his KTC value, keep trade cut value, was like 76 or 7,700, something in that realm.
Are
At the
you sure
time,
it wasn't that Baltimore game where he had 200
That's what
yards?
I was
was it after
about to
this game?
say.
I think it was after the explosion game, and that's why everyone was freaking out immediately after.
We have to look then. Let me see.
Well, either way, it's just uh one of those where okay, it's a first year wide receiver, and we're giving him up for the one a 23rd one, so 2 years away, a 24 one, 3 years away, and then this next draft second round, and you get Russell Gage as a throw in. At the time, I actually was like, wow, that's a steep price to pay, but he's been going off, so maybe it's the right move. And obviously, this is also Browns fan hindsight, but I was super like, oh, Jamar Chase, why did they pick him? Whatnot. Burrow's gonna die without getting an offensive line in front of him instead of going for wide receiver. But holy shit, was I wrong about this? That's just hindsight coming into it, and now it looks insane. Now, Will Anderson, Jonathan Brooks, Kyle Hamilton, pretty good picks, all things considered. Russell Gage, yeesh, but
He
that was
made the
throwing
best
silly.
out of the
Yeah,
picks that he was given.
He squeezed those lemons till they were dry.
Yeah,
That's for
it's
sure.
funny that the pick with hindsight, it looks better because I mean Kyle Hamilton and Will Anderson were home run picks at the like for those being defensive picks and everything. Like, I mean Will Anderson's might be worth close, almost like two late first at this point. Hamilton's probably worth a first, a late first. He's looking amazing. Like it looks better with the picks, which is not something I expected. By the way, it was
It
right
was after a
after the
200-yard
the
game.
200-yard
Okay.
game,
Yep.
so that makes it look even
Oh, so
worse.
maybe the freak out was because of his game. Okay.
So
3 years old.
I mean, a rookie having a 200-yard game on 10 targets is just fucking bonkers. So I believe the sentiment at the time, and still, was that why are you taking late first? Like, it doesn't matter that it's too late first, and we're calling it a late first because Paul's team was in first at this time, I believe, in year one.
yeah, I mean my
So
team was it already looked good before Chase, so I think it's
yeah,
fair.
so we're like, that. Why are you trading away this massive, massive hit? And you know he's a massive hit because he gets 200 yards, and he has a few other blow up games before
Yeah,
that
it's
as
not
well.
like he was a scrub beforehand, so
It just makes no sense from a rebuilding aspect. Has always been the argument for why it's such a bad trade. He's a 20 or 21-year-old receiver at the time having blow up games. You need to get more than two late firsts. I don't care.
yeah, yeah. So we think we can call this tier one.
Yep.
Shall we? So we had a bit of a lull in rip-off trades. A full year went by. There might have been some between. And Alec, he brought up a good point that um, some of these kind of just fell under the radar because there's been terrible trades all over the league, but we only really care about them when it's the best teams. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the McLaurin trade we forgot about when we were discussing it, but really is that wasn't a 2024 trade. I have to figure out put in that date
Let's
wrong.
call out one other bias, and it's just the fact that it's the people mainly involved with the podcast for the most part.
Yeah,
Sure.
that
Yeah.
too. Oh, this. Yeah, but to be fair, like I do think.
No, I'm not saying it's not. It's like a true bias. I'm just saying it's just the people that were asked to contribute. So,
Yeah, no, that for sure. Like it's like. I mean, I think you're right. I also do think that Alec and I are probably the worst defenders overall, and I'm pretty sure nobody would disagree. So there is.
yeah.
So there's that as well. So, I mean, but that's been a little more historical at this point. I mean, Alex still had okay, so he had the Zaire last year, and then the Pitts Olave, right?
Either way, let's keep going. Let's keep
Yeah,
going down
yeah,
the
yeah.
list. Sorry to.
Okay, so I was wrong. There was I forgot because of the two McLaurin trades. I put the wrong date in. So the McLaurin trade was one that fell under the radar. Like we didn't really like we talked about how bad it was
Yeah.
a little bit, but nobody really cared about it because it was what Jack ripping off Shane. So nobody really thought about it. But honestly,
Yeah.
absolutely terrible trade, right?
Awful trade. So I think Shane, much like you probably, was thinking, everyone around me is making these big trades to add big pieces to their team. I need to make something happen. And that was not making something happen. Because he was in like third place.
Shane
year
was a
one.
good team. Shane was,
Yeah,
and
it was a good team.
he was a good
wanted to
team up
compete.
till like his first 2 years. He was probably the third best team in the league, I think.
Yeah.
On and McLaurin was a good wide receiver. Not two firsts wide receiver, but he was good. Plus Juju. Um, this one's like inexcusable almost. Like you should be able to get more for two firsts than Terry McLaurin.
For sure. Shane's honestly lucky that none of those firsts turned into anything. Like that, everything I see on the Hall side, trash.
Yeah, this is puke inducing. Will Levis and Sky Moore for is after you get this gift of a trade through. Jesus. So the only one worse might be the AJ Brown trade, but we'll get to that one. I think I'm not sure if I put it tier one. I feel like it's tier one bad. It
Is that
just
just due to results-oriented thinking, though? Like we see
probably
the outcome.
probably.
I was gonna say I think it's tier 2, but the results just making that look as bad.
I want to throw the
Because it
results
was
out and just think about how we felt at the time.
I remember laughing at this trade.
Yeah.
I remember thinking nothing because I don't remember this one bit. It didn't even cross my radar this happened.
Yeah,
Maybe that
Because
makes it a tier
Jack is the
3.
one ripping off Shane, and Jack's team was dog shit then.
yeah, it was
No one
only
cared that he was ripping off Shane.
yeah, it was only after Alec mentioned like what I just said, like we only care about what the good teams are doing as far as rip-offs go that I thought about this trade. That's what triggered it because I'm like, yeah, that's that trade that I haven't thought about in years, even though it was like a massively unbalanced trade. But like right now, you take Terry McLaurin over Will Levis, Sky Moore, and
Yeah.
Juju Smith-Schuster. So
It was a win, I guess.
maybe 1.5. Tier one
It's a
and a
2 for
half.
me. It's a 2 for me. And my justification for that is that there aren't elite assets being passed around.
Yeah.
Like the firsts are still firsts, right? But it's not a Jamar Chase or McCaffrey elite asset that you just got for absolutely free. You got some nice draft picks for free, basically.
And you whiffed. You know.
Yeah, then you whiffed.
And I think both of those look like massive reaches, if I recall correctly. Like Will Levis shouldn't have been 107. Sky Moore shouldn't have been. Maybe could have been 109. I can't remember, but it doesn't seem like. Anyways, Jack, if you're listening, you fucked up. Sorry. Okay, tier two, fine. Tier two. Andrew, agreed.
Yep.
Okay. All right. I think this of all my trades, even beyond the Jamar Chase trade, had the worst reactions. So, yeah, what do
Oh yeah, for sure.
um, I want to give a small, quick overview, and the overview was I was trying to get
The defense starts.
the defense, yes, and that's the other bias. The big bias here is that, especially among Alec and I, that we defend our crap trades because we want everybody else to keep trading with us, you know, and it looks bad if we're ripping people off left and right, which, to be fair, I have not done in a long time, guys. So. So yeah, no,
Man.
this wasn't a fair trade. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but I was trying so hard for so long to get Kelsey off of Kohansky, and as everybody knows, it was very hard to contact this man about fantasy football. So just want to say that I was working this for months. Alec, what do you think?
It's like an auto tier 1 for me, and I guess the kind of framework for why it's a bad trade is it's like you traded like $1.75 for 7 quarters basically. That's the way I look at this. And if you've ever played fantasy football, you've always heard don't trade 4 quarters for $1.
I think it's fair to say that all of our listeners have played fantasy football.
Yeah, but like, you know, you've been hearing that for like probably everyone here probably a decade plus.
What do you mean? You guys play? Sorry. Bad joke.
It's good to have you on, Andrew. This is our second
we
podcast
got
with Andrew. It's good to have fresh blood.
we gotta have some shitty comedic relief every now and then. Come on.
Andrew,
No, but so at the time,
Go ahead. What
go
were
ahead,
you
go ahead.
thinking at the time of this
I was
trade?
gonna say, at the time, I remember Claypool being pretty respected.
No.
So, and I don't remember Cooper
Disagree.
popping off. No, like, maybe I'm forgetting years.
No,
But
no, I
like he
think
was what
this is
the number?
accurate.
He was a number one in Pittsburgh.
Okay, so
Well,
Claypool.
at least on the depth chart, he was number one. Let's call it that.
So this is my, Alec will correct me if anything sounds biased here. My recollection was Cooper wasn't like highly regarded or anything, but he wasn't like in the pits
He was
either.
a late first in value.
Yeah, late first. Kelsey was just, Kelsey.
Kelsey's
Um,
like a first and a
Yep.
second old.
yeah, Chase Claypool was like more like in the seconds range. Fryermuth was
No,
kind of
no, I'm
like,
not saying he was worth. I'm not saying Claypool was worth a one, but
yeah,
he
just
was
not worth
also like okay,
nothing
you
like
can see,
today. Yeah.
but you could see the upside of him being the number one on the Steelers wide receiver room.
Yeah, I don't think Claypool, like, I think in retrospect, this looks like easily like Zaire Franklin tier. But at the time, like, Fryermuth was like a low for,
A
like, he was
rookie.
kind of like Cooper. But
Yep.
like he was looking like a really promising tight end. Still is a promising tight end, but like at the time it was like he was younger and there were fewer tight ends out there. So everybody's kind of looking for what, the next big tight end could be. Bellinger was obviously more of a throw in, but like he was having a promising rookie season as far as tight ends go, and then a second, right? So it's like the assets look worse now, but they were like okay back then. Obviously it didn't equal Kelsey and Cooper though.
Yes, this is the classic. What can I put as the lowest common equal trade on keep trade cut sort of thing?
Yeah, this might have balanced out on KTC, which is ridiculous. It probably didn't, but it's
Yes.
probably close.
So if you look at
Yep. That
historical keep trade cut, um, Cooper and Fryermuth are valued around the same at this time, 4,000. It's like a late first. Claypool, like you guys were saying, was maybe a late to mid second rounder, so he wasn't nothing. And then Bellinger is probably a late second. I haven't looked him up, but
Yeah, it was pre-eye injury, but it wasn't like he had like incredible draft capital or was. I mean, now I'm trying to remember because I remember
okay,
him
he's
having
like
like a
a
solid.
late second,
well,
early third. That's what Bellinger was
he
being valued
came
at.
on a little bit when Waller got hurt or
Yeah,
something like that, or maybe it was.
I mean, he was having a nice start to the rookie season. Not saying that he was hyper valuable, just saying um, I feel bad for the
Uh,
guy getting injured.
so
So
let's break
Well,
down the
I
trade
do
this
remember
way.
him. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say Fryermuth equals Cooper. You can cancel those out in my mind, sure. And then it's kind of like saying, here's 3 late seconds for Kelsey. You can always get better than 3 late seconds for Kelsey from pretty much any owner. I think that was everyone's largest frustration was that everyone's trying to communicate with Kohansky. Can't get this man to get into a trade conversation for either of these guys. And there's plenty of guys in the league that could have offered better than 3 late second rounders for a guy like Kelsey. I think is
yeah, I mean
the
that's
largest
that's
frustration.
fair, but the same thing applies to like pretty much all these trades. Where like, wow, I could have offered more, and then why didn't you shop it around? And that
Yeah,
happened.
but this is one of those common sense ones where it's like I'm trading Kelsey away. I should get a first rounder worth of value in return.
That's fair. That's fair. Tier
Like
one.
tier one.
I don't disagree.
All right. We're getting some fresh faces in the noob column here. Sorry, Sam. I actually, so Sam, if you're watching this after, I don't know if he's gonna get on. I don't really know if this one's necessarily belongs on this list, but I put it on just to talk about it. And then here, we're into 2023. By the way, listeners, if you can think of any other horrible trades that we are not talking about now, please send them in. We would love to discuss them later. So let me know. Let us know.
We need to make this a live stream at some point.
Actually, that would be really fun at some point. So we'll try. Okay, so we have Alec again, a common denominator here. Got to throw it in there a little bit. Uh, so we had the Pitts Olave for really the. So this was whose first was this?
This was Mike's first.
Mike's first. Wait, how did you get this first? You got this from the Zaire trade? Oh, so
No, I traded Mixon, Pollard, and Marquise Brown for his 23 first and Najee.
that's crazy that I didn't even think about that trade because I remember now. Um, like I don't know if the value was off in that one or not, but it was another one of those that didn't make sense. Oh man. Um, so the did we know we didn't no we so we it's March, so we knew that it was the
We did
103.
know. We knew it was the 103.
So the 103, and we assumed that was going to be Bryce already, right?
We
Yeah.
assumed it was going to be one of the top
Oh,
three
yeah,
QBs.
because AR had that late come on, and then there's CJ Stroud. So I think we were actually thinking this was CJ Stroud.
Yeah.
This could have been CJ
No,
Stroud so easily.
if I remember correctly, you guys never thought it was going to be CJ.
Well, I think correct me if I might be
Maybe it
wrong.
was just because I was
I might be wrong.
going to say maybe I wasn't involved in those talks.
The
So
reason I think I thought this was going to be CJ, I'm not sure if it was, but I just remember AR coming on pretty late in the process. Like um wasn't his like crazy rise post combine post it was post combine at least, right? When's the combine?
oh, it
Yeah.
was post combine. The way I remember it is this. I had just posted that podcast at the time, which obviously sparked all of this. Oh
Oh,
my
Hey, Sam's
gosh.
here to
oh, we have
defend this
Sam.
trade.
Oh gosh, Sam, we're bringing
Did
you
I come
on
at
at
the
the
wrong time?
The perfect time. We're
the
talking about
perfect
Kyle Pitts
time.
and Olave
So
for the
I'll give you a
103.
second to think to get your thoughts together, Sam.
All
I'm
right,
I
gonna
feel like I've
give some
already answered
backstory.
this
you
one,
have it.
though.
This is so funny, but Andrew, continue yours, and I want to talk a little bit about
So
it
I
too.
had just posted the podcast, and they were talking about me taking AR at the 101 instead of Bijan. If you guys remember that,
Yeah.
we hadn't done this trade yet, and obviously I had never thought that because I had already done the trade for Algier at the time.
Mhm.
But
You must be right
it was one
because
of those where
it's
it was still AR or Bryce Young at the 102 debate versus Stroud ever considering jumping into the 103.
yeah, you
Mhm.
must be right. I thought it was pre-AR jumping up, but I didn't realize the AR hype started so early. Because I was thinking this was Bryce at 2, CJ at 3, and then AR like wasn't even on the radar for those picks yet. But you're totally right because the first podcast we had, we were discussing this trade post, or maybe the second, I can't remember. One of the first podcasts we had, we were discussing this trade, and then we called Sam or texted Sam to get on to defend
It's at like
himself.
11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Like,
Get in here, defend yourself.
it's all blindsided. Like, oh, why'd you do the Pitts Olave trade?
Well, you're the one that made the trade, Sam. Who did you think that 103 was going to be at the time?
I mean, I thought it was going to be either Bryce or Stroud for myself. I was always a little bit skeptical of Richardson, even though like the rushing upside, I just tended to like a pocket quarterback better, I guess. So I was like really between uh, Bryce Young and Stroud, and I picked wrong in
I
hindsight.
mean, this
but
QB class was hyped up, though.
yeah. Well, I was just following like the process that the NFL was reflecting
Yeah.
to us, which is that he's the number one pick. So
No, yeah, and I don't want to like say, well, I guess we knew what it was going to be, so it's relevant. The hindsight's like, it's not hindsight, like we knew what the pick was going to be. Um,
mm,
so I remember really not liking this, because Pitts, this is another one that hindsight helps a bit on Sam's side. Like Pitts was viewed really highly, and I viewed him really highly. I really did see him as a game-breaking type. And Olave was just coming off of his rookie season, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
which he
Yeah.
was doing great.
1,000+ yards, 6
He was
touchdowns, I
probably
think.
worth like standalone, like the 105 or 106.
Yeah, so I remember I felt like this was a huge
Which is actually crazy, by the way. I want to bring this full circle back to Brian Thomas Jr. If we're calling Olave the 105 or 106 after his rookie season, um, then how are we ever saying that the haul that Kyle got is a bad haul?
I'm not sure if were we saying that was the 105, 106?
I believe we were at the time saying he was
Huh.
worth about the 105 or 106.
Hmm.
Anyways, that's besides the point. I
Maybe
think
you're
our
right. I
valuations
don't
have
know.
just changed a lot over time.
Yeah, I've been more onto the guaranteed wide receiver, young wide receiver that shows his stuff more than like the unknown wide receiver because I just think the hit rate's pretty low, especially
For
if you're not
sure.
getting those like top tier guys like your um I don't know, Marvin Harrison types.
Yeah.
Anyways, a little besides the point. I don't know if this is tier one looking at these other trades, but actually I think this is tier one. I felt like this was closer to tier one, maybe tier two. Alec?
I'm gonna call it a tier 2 because if we try to take the same process as before, at least like my process for determining tiers, in the are you getting elite players for free, basically. Um, I do think that Olave for the 103 or Pitts for the 103, that trade was never happening straight up. So it's an overpay to get another presumed elite asset, but there's no like absolutely free elite asset, I think. That's why it's a tier 2 for me.
I guess I kind of viewed Pitts or Olave potentially at that 103. I know you didn't say you said that you wouldn't do the trade one straight up, but I feel like that would have been a fair trade at the time. So maybe for me it's tier one.
Perhaps. Yeah.
I don't know. Andrew, Sam, what are we thinking?
What belongs in tier one?
So
I
far
feel like I
we're
missed
looking
on
at
all that.
McCaffrey in tier one, Jamar Chase, and the Kelsey trade in tier one. We put the Goff Kittle trade two-ish, and then the McLaurin trade in two.
Yeah,
I'll
I mean, it
say
was a
that.
bad trade in hindsight.
Yeah.
But and like at the time, I knew it was like an overpay, and there were earlier times, or there was times in the season prior to that trade happening that Alec was offering just like Olave for that pick or just Pitts for that pick. So like with that in perspective, it's not great.
I'll give the tiebreaker to Andrew here.
Yeah. Andrew, are you talking? I
At
can't
the
hear you.
moment,
Oh,
I was gonna say at the moment I thought it was an Alec fleece yet again, but I think Sam won. So, well, let me rephrase that. Not now he won it, but draft last year he had won it.
hmm.
So ultimately I put it at 2.
Okay.
Not the worst.
Tier two. Tier two. All right, Sam. I was defending this just before you got on. I just put this on for discussion. I don't really think it belongs on this list, but this is a trade up for JSN
Yeah,
from Jordan Addison. So he basically added a 25 first for the trade up plus Gallup.
I mean Gallup became nothing. So
Gallup became
kind of
nothing. I viewed Gallup as nothing at the time, so it kind of looked like it was just a first, late first, albeit probably, but now it's kind of more of a mid first.
Yeah,
But
we were assuming though that that'd be late first.
yeah, I'd say
Our
late first
assumptions
is
are so
fine.
bad.
So bad. So late first for the trade up from Addison to JSN. As our old friend JSN, I was never one to say that JSN was a tier, like really even a tier above, the Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, those guys. So I really didn't like it. But most people view JSN as being a step above. So I don't think
It's
it's
not
like the
even a tier
worst.
3 for me. It's not even a bad trade for me. It's just an overpay,
Yeah, I think
which
it's.
doesn't necessarily mean a bad trade. It's just an overpay.
I agree. I think that this trade was. This is like in the tier of 1,000 other trades, basically. Like almost
Yeah.
every other trade has some value difference, right? So I'm not really sure this belongs. I put it on because Austin um, suggested it in the chat, but maybe it's not really even something that belongs here.
Yeah, I mean, I think this
Tier
is
of
also one that I talked about at the beginning, like our first first podcast ever. It was like I talked about the Pitts trade and then I talked about the JSN trade. So I feel like we have actual like digital footprint of what I thought in the moment. But I think it just came down to like thinking that JSN was like a cut above everyone else. But you know,
I'm
Yeah,
willing to bet that during that podcast, I defended this trade heavily.
I think it's in doesn't belong tier. Let's just move
Yeah.
on.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So we have another. Okay, so a few contentious ones at the end. So we have the AJ Brown trade with Mike, and then Zaire. Finally, last but not least, I don't really necessarily think that. Did we lose somebody? Um,
No,
mute.
I believe Sam just joined the stream.
yeah,
oh, okay,
I'm like
okay,
looking at what you
got it.
guys are looking at now.
Oh, I see, I see. Okay, I just heard a noise. And then the last but not least, Zaire Franklin trade. I put that Garrett Wilson trade here, but it doesn't really belong either necessarily. I mean, I think it kind of belongs, just not really in the level of ripoffs that we're talking about up here, but we can discuss it. AJ Brown trade. Andrew, what did you think about this at the time?
At the time, I thought that okay, Mike's trading away a premier asset, and he's getting a pretty. It's not a bad trade at the time. I was I was upset about the whole process when you look at the next trade, but the trade itself, I was fine with. So tier 3, I'll just leave it at that.
Wow.
Dang, that was back to back. I didn't realize that. Back to back days.
Back-to-back days. Alec, what did you think?
This is kind of akin to the Kelsey trade, but not as bad. It's one of those trades that is 4 quarters for $1, and Mike, I believe that's exactly what he wanted to do. Was to get a ton of assets so that he could like spread the wealth, I guess. It's just one of those process moves that, in my mind, never makes sense to do. So that's
Now,
my biggest gripe with it is
I feel like the
the
value
conversion
is
there.
not even there either, though, because you're talking like latest first. And by the way, we knew what the picks were at this time, so Mike was going into it like I don't know. I assume targeting these types of players at those picks going into it. It just a, a little. I mean, this return's really dog shit for AJ Brown. So
Yeah. Was this after
I
AJ
just
Brown had the good Eagles season, or was it before that season?
this this
It was
is
definitely after because I think at the time of this trade he was like wide receiver 8 or wide receiver 7,
he had to be
like
higher,
keep trade
right?
cut.
Because he just put up 1,511 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So you put up 1,511 touchdowns. You're 25 years old, and you trade him away for what you know 100% to be the last pick in the first round, the second pick in the second round, the 10th pick in the second round, and who cares, like a third round pick.
Yeah, it's just really light.
well, ultimately though, I do remember people being like, okay, this is the problem that we had in the moment. It's like, okay, it's somebody who wants to sell off and let's start rebuilding. That's the way I still am trying to value this trade as a standalone.
I still want
And
to see
yeah,
this
it's
like
light. It's light. Don't get me wrong,
because
but
like
it
as a
wasn't.
standalone, we're talking about like elite of the elite in terms of production for AJ Brown at the time. Like, and you're like to me at least, this is like tier one individually, not even including
It
the
is tier
Zaire
one for me.
Franklin,
It is tier 1 for me.
because
Wasn't Maybe we need to look up the sort of historical value. And I know you guys are talking about like, okay, he's tier 1 at worst, top of tier 2. But like wasn't like, okay, a late one with an early second and some, I guess it's
Mid
just a
second.
matter of historical values kind of
Let's see. So
fluctuating that sort of thing.
July 2023. So July 23, he was around like the 7,000 range. Oh,
That's
Okay.
really light.
Yep.
Yeah. Personally, I'm going to put this, I think of this one in tier 1. I don't know.
It's 1 for
I
me.
view it tier 1. I think. Okay, then let's talk about the next trade first then.
Well, hold on. We haven't heard Sam.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was the one who made the trade. No, I think this is pretty bad. Like in hindsight, so I went into this thinking that I was gonna have to give up like the 105, 106 at the time. Like I did not think I was gonna get away with not trading away any of the picks within the top six that I had, and was almost expecting him to counter and ask for, rather than like the 112, like do a 106 and then maybe the rest of that comp. But like for him to just like accept it for a late first and then like the rest of those like later picks is, yeah, I just felt like he didn't necessarily like ask for more when he probably should have, because I was probably willing to give up additional stuff to get AJ Brown at that point.
Yeah, I mean, the guys in the upper echelon of wide receivers, I think 7,000 was probably underselling. Like, I know AJ Brown's historically kind of not hated, undervalued wide receiver among the
Mhm.
elite wide receivers. And so, like, even 7,000 probably wasn't justifiable after coming off of the season he just came off of. So, and I know a lot of other people were trying to trade for AJ Brown too at the time. I'm gonna put
Well,
it
that was
here.
another component of it too, is that he got so many offers and he chose that one. So like, while it's tier 1 and it's clearly he should have gotten more, at the same time he was also fielding a ton of different offers. So while it like looks bad in hindsight and is bad in hindsight, it was the one that he wanted to make when he might have gotten better offers throughout the whole process.
Yeah, it's really a hard one to wrap your mind around, to be honest. Um, and then we
This
have
one doesn't. This one doesn't belong. Next.
doesn't belong. And this one, I mean, okay, so you're tanking, trading AJ Brown and drafting a bunch of young assets, I guess. Like, and obviously he went in with a defensive focus. So he's getting defensive players who take usually a few years to ramp up, or at least a year to ramp up. You assume he's going for more of a tank, and then he trades for one of the top scoring linebackers in the league in Zaire Franklin, indicating he wants to compete, right? So it's a little confusing in that. What are we thinking? Zaire Franklin?
I mean,
I
it's
mean,
definitely a 1. I'll let someone else talk first before I talk for
Yeah,
like
let's go
5
with
minutes
Sam.
straight.
I think this one is, I feel like we were going back and forth on which is like truly the top or the biggest lopsided trade, and this one feels like it belongs as the most lopsided trade, given that like the 103 has gotten pretty like insane talents. It's gotten like Garrett Wilson, or actually, was it Traylon Burks who got drafted at the
It
Traylon
103?
was.
Burks got drafted. Yep.
Oh my gosh! But anyways, it could have been Garrett Wilson at 103. It could have been CJ Stroud at 103. Like the 103 can get you some like generational type dynasty players,
And
and
we
to think that he
knew
can,
going
yeah,
in that this was going to be neighbors or, well, I guess we didn't know exactly, right? We didn't know
I mean, you guys all thought I was getting Caleb Williams when the trade went through.
yeah, we thought it might be the number one pick. Sorry, Sam, go ahead.
yeah, just that. With that in mind, trading that away for a linebacker, and linebackers like rarely go for first. Like even Fred Warner or like Roquan or Foye, it would be tough to get like a late first or maybe like a mid first for those guys, and to get an early first for a linebacker who is not of the caliber of Fred Warner or Foye or Roquan is just kind of like ludicrous.
That's what I thought. Andrew, how did you think at the time?
This is S tier.
Yeah.
Uh,
You
I
guys
mean, the
wanted to
fact that
all
we had
burn the
a
league
whole
down.
well, no, but that's what I was literally about to say. Is the fact that we had a whole veto day discussion is all you need to know. That this is no matter what, this is the 101 of these.
Yeah,
That's all I.
it was pretty bad.
Yeah, and even if hindsight came in, the fact that we all had the meltdowns that we did is all you need to say.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's absolutely one, absolutely in contention for the worst. Um, I think going back to what I was talking about earlier, where there's kind of the two sides of the coin, the isolated trade and the process trade. It kind of hits like S tier bad in both sides there, which really contributes to it being such a bad trade. Um, Zaire, for reference, was I believe either the 1 or 2 at linebacker that year, but he still didn't have a contract. Um, he did eventually get a 3-year contract, which made the trade look at least a little better, and he's still continuing to produce very highly. So, using hindsight a little bit, he has continued to be an elite linebacker, but that's
Agreed.
that's just looking at the player. From a process standpoint, you're trading what could be an early first for a linebacker that doesn't have a contract. Really that's really scary. Zaire easily. I mean, he. I was always arguing that he is a huge producer and he's making these extra plays, which he was. And that's why he got his contract. But linebackers don't always get that contract, so he could have easily fizzled out, and he could be nothing right now.
All right, just for argument's sake, Alec, at the time when you made this trade, or no, it was you. Let's say you got a late one for this up, like whatever draft class it would have been. Would you have accepted it straight up? Just one, let's
Sorry,
call it 110.
can you reiterate what's the question?
I know the hotel room started making weird noises. If you made like if it was a straight up offer of a 110 for
For
Zaire,
Zaire
are you taking it?
at that time, I
Yeah.
would not have.
Okay,
He was too productive.
then I think that also states to the standpoint of you have to overpay for elite talent. So just to give, you know, um, devil's advocate kind of sort of mindset.
Yeah, I mean, like I was not going to trade him for less than a mid first, which is kind of the point I was always driving home, because of how productive he was.
Yeah, it's
But
more on Mike's side here, just like thinking that Zaire is going to be the guy who's fixing your team. Like you have to think that if you are giving away. I mean, like the draft class was hyped. We had a lot of good QBs. We had, it would have fixed the QB problem for him potentially. I mean, let's not forget this would have been Jaden Daniels if he kept the pick.
yeah,
Um, that's rough. I'm giving it S tier. Any dissents, Alec? I will write it in here.
I mean, this is the definition of getting an elite player for free. So
Yeah. I'm not even. Let's not even talk about the Garrett Wilson because it's just. I probably maybe tier 3, tier 4 max, right? Um,
I don't know if I agree with that, but
I think
we
tier
didn't have
3.
to. I'd probably call it like low tier 2.
Yeah, maybe. Nice to get Bowers at least. I mean, is there another KC wide receiver? Uh, anyways, Jack. I'll have you know that Jack is working on improving his fantasy games. So we'll see what
He's using AI
he's
to.
using AI. Okay, because Austin's such a loyal listener and maybe is listening still, an hour, 10 minutes in, figured I'd do the shout outs for the love trades. I mean, realistically, like Austin's had some horrible trades in hindsight, right? Like Love and Hertz are the prime contenders, but really they weren't necessarily anything more than a slight overpay one
No,
way
they
or
weren't
another at
crazy
the
at the
time.
time at all. It was
Yeah,
like, oh, okay, sure, that's
yeah.
a trade.
I mean, I was happy to get Love, but uh, so sorry, Austin. Because it's so late, we're probably not going to discuss these anymore. Any other closing thoughts, guys?
Trey Lance played some football this last weekend, so can you really call that a bad trade?
So what was that? A first and a second for Trey
Yeah,
Lance back in the day?
yeah.
I remember liking the Trey Lance side of that trade at the time.
I mean, at the time, it was like, oh, he's gonna be the quarterback for this amazing San Francisco team. Looks promising.
You win some, you lose some. You got the Hurts trade going for you, though.
Hmm.
Well, loyal listeners, hour 10 minutes in. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Hope you enjoyed.